Everyone, my name is Flora and welcome to By The Book. It's an interactive webinar brought to you by our co-hosts, cousins Peter, Danny, and John Bookvar. Peter is a CNBC contributor and CIO of Bleakley Advisory Group, and John is Vice Chair of Neurosurgery at Lenox Hill Hospital, where he's an investigator at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research. Danny, John's twin, is president at Thrasio, the largest acquirer of Amazon third-party private label businesses, and has 20 plus years of experience leading fast-growing consumer businesses for global brands, such as the NFL and Weight Watchers. Johnny, Danny, and Peter are all leaders in their respective fields, and we'll be discussing health, wellness, finance, business, and life with our special guests, President Mike Fitz, Dean Horace Anderson, and Adam Lowenberg. Feel free to check out our previous episodes on our YouTube channel, and make sure to tune in again next week for a very special episode in honor of Netflix's original series, Lenox Hill, starring our very own John Bookvar, finally dropping. Without further ado, take it away, Bookvars.
Thank you, Flora. I'm Peter Bookvar, and before we start, I need to just give a quick disclaimer that John and Dan are not affiliated with Bleakley Advisory Group or Private Advisor Group, and nothing they say will be taken as investment advice, and nothing I say will be taken as medical advice. I want to start by talking about the jobs report today. It was the May payroll number, and going into the release, expectations were for a decline in jobs of 7.5 million after a decline of 22 million in the two prior months. But we got an upside surprise of 2.5 million person increase. So we can attribute the decline in jobs to the forced shutdown that we imposed on ourselves in order to contain the virus. And now that states are opening up again over the past month and prospectively over the coming month, we hope that many of those jobs come back. And that was reflected in today's report. We still have a long way to go. We've lost about 22 million jobs. We've gained about 2.5, but it was a surprise to the upside, and the stock market rose as a result. So I'm going to pass it back to Danny and let him take it from here.
Actually, Johnny, over to you. Let's do a quick state of healthcare in the city update.
So as I do every week, I'm here at 77th and Lexington at Lenox Hill Hospital. I just got the dashboard today. We had 0 patients come to the emergency room last night with COVID. That just is terrific news. As you know, yesterday we had 0 deaths in New York for the first time since March. There remains only 16 patients at Lenox Hill Hospital with COVID, and those are what we call long-term ventilated patients. And we actually at Northwell have built 2 long-term ventilation facilities out on Long Island. So the hospitals, and I speak for all the hospitals, not just Northwell hospitals, but all the hospitals here in New York, they're cleaner, they're all renovated, they're almost at full capacity. We had an email today showing we're going back to full elective surgery next week. I can tell you, these hospitals have never been a better place to work in. They are safer than they were, they're cleaner than they were. It's really been an incredible turnaround. We had a conference call right before this with our colleagues from Wuhan and Hong Kong and all over the globe. And except for what we're seeing in South America, Latin America, the Middle East, as those climates are winterizing, we're seeing a big tick in their numbers. And I think Brazil is really the next zone that's going to be in real trouble. So as our temperature warms in July and August, I expect a really, really small number of viral particles. Stay outside, wear a mask, and you should be in good shape now, and we'll be ready for any issues in September. The one thing I'll add, if you're planning on taking mass transit, please wear a mask. I mean, you have to wear a mask, but mass transit is safe. If you're close to people, just wear a mask. So that's sort of, I'm very happy to report the health report here is quite good. Back to you,
That's
Dan.
great. Thanks, Johnny, and thanks, Peter, for that market update. We may come back to you both with questions. Want to just first introduce our first 2 guests, Michael Fitz and Horace Anderson. Adam will get to you later, but Michael and Horace, welcome everybody. Michael Fitz is the 15th president of Tulane University. You left there, much to Horace and I's chagrin, in July of 2014 when you left the University of Pennsylvania, where you served as our dean and professor. I don't know, Horace, did you take administrative law with Dean Fitz?
I did not.
Did not.
Somehow
Good for
missed
you.
that.
Well, it was it was a highlight for me. Your accomplishments are unbelievable, Mike. I've seen what you've done at Tulane with your emphasis on cross-disciplinary education and research, much in Ben Franklin's image for us Penn folks. You're born and raised in Philadelphia, right? And a Philly family. Your dad was chair of which department at Penn Med?
Surgery. Not
Surgery.
neurosurgery, surgery.
Surgery. So I know when you were at Penn, you quadrupled our law school endowment. You had a 40% increase in the size of the law school faculty, but by far your biggest accomplishment was getting law degrees from me and Horace, who deserved it. I'm not so sure I did, as evidenced by my career. But we're so happy to have you. And Horace, you went off to do amazing things. You're now dean of the law school at Pace. And you've been there as dean since December of 2019. Before that, you were a professor there, but you've got this cool background of both consultant and then before that, a successful attorney at White & Case. So thank you. It's so good to see you again. Also a Penn undergrad just before Johnny and I got there in 1991. So shout out to the Quakers. And we're so happy to have you here. And my dog is so happy to have you here. So to start off with both of you running big institutions in major cities, we wanted to start with you, Mike, and talk about reentry. We know last week you talked about Tulane's reentry and how you're planning to come back in the fall. But maybe recap quickly, how did Tulane make the pivot to virtual learning at the end of this year and mid-semester? How'd that go, and was it successful?
You know, for us, it went seamlessly. Needless to say, in New Orleans, we're used to hurricanes. So we actually have a whole protocol for if need be evacuation. And we put it into gear, and very quickly, really before there was a case in New Orleans of COVID-19, we evacuated the campus, students packed up, and I think it went extremely well and went to working remotely and teaching and learning remotely. And because of hurricanes, our faculty was required to know how to teach remotely in those circumstances.
That's great. Horace, did you do something similar?
Yes, for different reasons. We don't have the same hurricane preparation background, but one of the things that we had been thinking about over the last few years is how to deal with snow days. You know, back when we were in school, if school was shut down because of weather, then you had to figure out how you would make up in-person hours after the fact. And we wanted to move away from that so that a snow day just became a day where you were in class remotely. And so we had been thinking about that and working toward that. And the university actually in January or February, had been finalizing a Zoom license to prepare for, for snow days as part of that preparation. And because of that, we were able to pivot pretty quickly to remote instruction. We also had the benefit of some early planning in terms of the university's administration keeping an eye on COVID-19, I think, before some other people and institutions were. And so we started some planning in February. We had been negotiating a license for technology at that early. And so when things changed in March, it was, I won't say it was painless, but we certainly had what we needed in place to do it.
Can I just interject? I've been in New Orleans now for 6 years. I've never worried about the problems of a snow day at Tulane University.
That's right. I thought you were going to say, how do you do Socratic method in law school via Zoom? Is it just, it's the same thing?
Zoom, I've participated in several classes, including law school classes at Tulane. And it's actually, you're more visible to the faculty member through Zoom than you are in the back row of a class. So.
Right. Right. As the class gets bigger, you get more of the back row problem because the back row becomes the next screen that you can't see right now. But for a lot of classes, you do get to see just about everybody and get to see facial expressions and reactions. And so it actually is a
That's interesting.
is a pretty good tool compared to the ones that I had used in the past.
It's a very quick story. Right before we went virtual, I was approached in a restaurant by one of our senior faculty members who pleaded with me not to go virtual. He said, you know, we couldn't, he didn't feel the capacity to teach. After we went virtual, I got an email from him a couple weeks later in which he said he never felt as close to his students as he did online, sort of talking to them. There was a bond that didn't exist before.
Oh, that's great.
Dean Anderson, how are the students going to take the bar exam this summer? Is it going to be online, or are they going to do it in classrooms separated?
Well, in New York, they are going to do it later than usual. So it's been pushed back to September because of the unavailability at the time of the original planning of the Javits Center and there's an equivalent space up in Albany, and those are the two big testing sites in most years. And the Javits Center was a field hospital at the time that the state started to plan for this summer's bar. So it's been pushed out to to September. And it's, as of today, going to be in person in September with a lot of density management at the sites. So without the availability of the big sites, the states turn to a number of smaller sites, including our law school, to be used for testing. So that's still a work in progress, but the plan is the bar will be given in September on site and observing social distancing. So that'll mean instead of really two big sites, there'll be a bunch of smaller sites around the state, and the Board of Law Examiners is scouting sites and doing space planning on sites even as we speak.
Makes sense. And I know, Dean, Mike Fitz, you announced last week Tulane's moving forward with in-person on-the-ground classes in the fall. Do you want to talk about that guidance?
Sure. This is really fascinating. Obviously, as president of the university, unlike as dean of the law school, I have a medical school to advise me. And so we have great infectious disease people who we've been constantly talking to about this. And our goal really is to come back on ground, protecting the safety of all the entire community, and really a sort of a safe place. So what we're doing is coming back a little bit earlier, mid-August, and we're going to keep everybody on campus, not have breaks all the way through Thanksgiving. And the idea is to not have students going back for Thanksgiving or other events, viewing travel as the time of greatest risk. So keeping them on campus. We have, you know, by some standards, the most national student body in the country, so they're coming from everywhere. So you want to keep them on the campus together. And then once they're on the campus, to keep them truly as safe as possible. Every institution is grappling with this question, but we are going to test everybody, students, faculty, staff, before they come back on. And we'll do periodic repeated testing, really to ensure the safety of the community. And then social distancing. We're having new classrooms, space, dorm rooms to really keep people so that they're not with one another. The biggest challenge for us is that Tulane is one of the most relational cultures in the world. And sort of the warmth and connections between everybody are so important. So how do you maintain that? How do you create that in a world where people are distant? As Johnny said, we're hoping the warmth of New Orleans, and we'll keep them outside, and that they can connect with one another, even though they'll be socially distanced.
President
Fitz,
go ahead, John.
Sorry.
You know, how are you going to address the social gatherings, for example, at the boot or the bars or the fraternity parties? To me, that is, you know, obviously there is an element of socializing, like you mentioned, and those are going to be areas that are going to be difficult to police.
You know, we're going to have to rely on the responsibility of the students, and the students, you know, we're talking to them at this point. We'll be coming back on ground in 2.5 months. So there's time, but sort of a protocol and understanding when they come back about what they have to sort of observe while they're on campus. I also should say, as you know, the risks, the health risks, the kids under 25 are very different from individuals who have pre-existing conditions or older. We hope that they understand, while it may be less of a risk to them, there may be a risk to older people, you know, and that they will exercise that responsibility out of concern for everyone else.
President Fitz, I have a question sort of similar. In terms of housing and the dorms, are there going to be any new protocols there with students living obviously in the same room, sharing bathrooms? How does that work?
Great question. And first of all, obviously, we're deconcentrating the dorms so that we are reducing the number of students in the dorms. We are going to offer single options to students who want it, but it won't be on campus. It'll have to be off campus where we're getting other facilities for our students. In terms of the dorms themselves, we're literally talking about radical cleaning, radical distancing, really keeping students apart and trying to take advantage of sort of the outdoors of New Orleans. We're also have built a whole slew of new temporary classrooms so that every class will be in a room twice the size of what's necessary. And we just built a new dining facility last year that tripled the number of seats in dining, and we're building a temporary facility as well with that. So literally the student body can eat socially distanced as part of that.
Wow.
Obviously, this is something every institution in society is confronting at this point. And we're really depending on sort of the ingenuity and the commitment of the entire body.
Horace, what is PACE doing? Have you guys rolled out your plans for the fall?
The plan is still being developed, but the gist of the plan is exactly what Mike described. Start earlier and end at Thanksgiving, and do as much as we can to provide a safe on-ground experience. And that's going to involve de-densifying. So, you know, the classroom capacities are going to be different compared to what they usually are. Same thing with the dorms, same thing with the dining hall. And we're going to be getting creative in terms of combining for any given course in on-ground instruction, synchronous remote instruction, and asynchronous instruction. So the goal is for every class, because we're going to have students and faculty who are at different levels of risk with regard to themselves and their families. So we're going to have students who are probably going to be remote for the entire semester. We have some who really are clamoring to get back and be on campus. And so they'll have that opportunity in as safe a way as we can provide. And there will be some people that end up sort of in between or having a hybrid experience. So we're going to try to give people the opportunity for that in-person reaction at a safe distance, because I think they're definitely craving that after, well, just 90 days and counting now of isolation. So give them that opportunity, but do it in the safest way we can, and putting in a bunch of protocols around testing and tracing that we haven't had to deal with before, but with which we've become very familiar over the last few months.
So the healthcare workforce has become a voice for the current civil activism with George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. In fact, nationally today, we had a white coat for Black Lives movement nationally at 1 o'clock. And I see the college and law experience and campuses as a really important place for activism. So as these peaceful protests have come through, you probably are anticipating seeing that healthy activism back on campus. How has the last few weeks changed your approach, and what is your viewpoint moving forward?
So obviously, this is an important moment for our country and every institution. I should note our medical students at Tulane are holding a white coat demonstration. It was originally scheduled for this weekend, but because of the weather, it's going to be next week. Literally this past year, you may have seen it, there were a group of Black Tulane medical students who together went out in their white coats to a plantation in outskirts of Louisiana, and sort of had an incredible picture that went viral about how, you know, their ancestors never would have understood that they would have been standing here. So there have already been a series of protests at Tulane, even though for the most part, most of our students are across the country. But for those in New Orleans and the medical students, they've already been deeply involved. This is Tulane's a very socially committed institution, very conscious of its obligations. A famous line, you know, not for oneself, for one's own, that's our motto. So clearly our students are, like everybody, deeply anguished by this, despair, and but I do think they're in the process of using this as both a way to change the world, make it less systemically racist, and change Tulane, which, you know, we understand our obligations as an institution to respond to this.
Yeah, I would say that at PACE, our social justice is in our DNA, and, you know, we're about and have always been about, I think, trying to use our law degrees to improve society. And we're named for Elizabeth Haub, who was one of the pioneers of the global environmental movement, and we're very known for our environmental law program. But we're also very serious about criminal justice and about social justice in general. So what I've found over the last 2 weeks in my conversations with faculty and with students is that people are getting involved certainly in demonstrations and in sort of very sort of physical shows of commitment to the cause of justice. And we are embarking on conversations about how now we take our student energy and their legal training and give and connect them with the work that needs to be done outside of campus. And so we are, over the next couple of weeks, going to be taking the conversation from expressing our indignation and anger and desire for change, and starting to connect students to a lot of the work that our faculty is doing. And that's something we have always done, but now we've got students like emailing me and calling me saying, what can I do now? And with some of them, I've had to say, what you do now is finish your first year. And then we'll talk about getting you involved in pro bono work and externships and some of our clinic work. So the energy, the great thing is that the energy has come to find me, which has been great. And now we're starting to direct that energy. And I think just as a law school, that's very important, but just as a part of higher education, it's important. Mike knows that, you know, the higher education enterprise has often been under attack over the last few years, and questions about whether we add the right type of value to society are questions that we grapple with in just trying to attract students to campuses. And we're headed toward a dip in the number of college-age students who will be entering our marketplace. And I think our response here across all disciplines is really important, not because it's important in and of itself, or not just because of that, but because I think it shows what we can accomplish when we take the energy and intelligence of our youth and we marry that with some mentorship and guidance of our faculty and administration. You can actually have direct impact in the world. And I think it's a good opportunity for us to remind the world of that.
So I'd like to connect the sort of the first issue we talked about and what we're talking about now, and Horace is talking about. You know, there's a great question about universities coming back. Why do we think it's so important that they come back on ground? And when I think about the role of universities, both in educating the next generation of students in a world that's going to be different because of this pandemic, I don't think it's ever been more important that we, in a sense, came back as institutions. And I think of Tulane, you know, after Katrina, was so involved in the rebuilding of New Orleans. And we're really the first university to require community service as part of what it is we do. It's part of our DNA as a university. So this is just a natural moment for Tulane as a university, not only come back because of our infectious disease research, but to come back as part of the solutions to what is going to be, and we hope will be, a very different society.
Yeah, that was exactly my point. I feel exactly that. There's the activism in this country in history has often come out of our campuses and the youth, and we see that beautifully on the streets of New York. And so to harness that energy it seems ripe. And we're seeing that in the healthcare force that was already energized by the pandemic, is tackling the pandemic of racism with equal earnest.
Yeah, it's a great connection. Thanks, Horace and Mike. I want to go a bit off script on something. So Horace, and this is a segue to our third guest, Adam Lowenberg, in the music industry. So I don't know if everybody knows that you happen to be a copyright and communications expert, and one of your areas of focus was hip hop and copyright law. So you got to give us the 30-second blurb on that before we introduce our hip hop talent agent, Adam Lowenberg, because it's too cool a connection.
All right, so the 30-second blurb. You know, hip hop is music that I grew up with. It's music made by and large, by people who made music with what they had, right? So in the absence of strong music programs in some public school systems, and so in the absence of being able to learn how to play an instrument, how do you make music? One of the ways you made music was by using old records and electronic equipment to create new songs by sampling from those old records. And so culturally, there's an approach to copying that's very different in traditional hip hop music than in the copyright law. And there are, the copyright law generally underappreciates the value of other norms about copying besides the ones that are enshrined in the copyright law. Essentially, the norms enshrined in copyright law are copying from somebody is a strict liability tort. And if you do it, regardless of what your intention was in doing it, then you're probably liable. There are a bunch of exceptions to that, but that's sort of the general ethos. Hip hop music actually prizes borrowing and prizes being able to take from something else, something established, and very importantly, make something new out of it. So the copying rule, so to speak, or the copying norm is, as long as you are being what copyright law would call transformative in your copying, then the community accepts it. And as long as when you are less transformative with your copying, the copying is obvious, such as borrowing a line from an extremely well-known song, but not borrowing from an unknown artist, because that would be considered biting in hip hop, which is bad. So, my work has explored how the norms in that particular community, and there are all sorts of communities that have norms about copying that we can learn from. Stand-up comedians have norms about copying, magicians have norms about copying, jam band artists have norms about copying, and hip hop artists have norms as well. So I've enjoyed exploring where all those other norms among creative people can be brought to bear on the law that we use to govern generation of creative works. That was probably more than 30 seconds, but.
No, but super interesting, right, Mike? You taught him something.
Luckily, I didn't teach him intellectual property.
Yeah.
That was Bob Gorman, actually.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, Horace, it is super interesting and a great segue. And both of you, please feel free to stay and listen as we ask Adam some questions. And there may be some overlap, but we'll go for about 15 more minutes. Adam Lowenberg, welcome. You're a music marketing leader and executive with almost 30 years of industry experience. You're a partner at Primary Wave, where you're responsible for all marketing related activities, and a talent agent that has represented and works with folks like the, I guess, IP of Bob Marley, Smokey Robinson, Whitney Houston, etc. You've worked at Island Def Jam and Arista, and welcome. We love to have you, and good to see you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
And Peter, you want to take it over from here?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Hey, Adam, good to see you.
Yeah.
So I know you've had a busy couple months. First, dealing with a lot of your clients and the lack of live music and how your musician clients are sort of pivoting their businesses in ways of and trying to find other ways of connecting with fans. Certainly this week with Blackout Tuesday, and I guess we can start with that of how you managed your company and your clients and sort of rallying around that.
Yeah, you know, it has been a crazy last couple of months for sure. And with this week, you know, what was so interesting was sitting down with the entire company. We spent about 2.5 hours on Monday prior to Blackout Tuesday, and had a company-wide Zoom and let everyone just talk. And the senior executives sat back and listened. And you know, the guests here were talking about the youth culture and how vibrant and how much they want to create change is phenomenal inside of Primary Wave. So we really let them speak, and it was raw and it was emotional. And then on Tuesday, we had breakout discussions, really trying to come up with ideas for change, not just words, obviously, making it because the youth of our company is so anxious and wants change right away, making them understand that, listen, we take this incredibly seriously. It's going to take days, maybe some weeks, having internal task force, really setting goals and objectives. And listen, for us at Primary Wave, I mean, Danny alluded to it, it's not just the responsibility that we have being in the music business, but specifically on the publishing side of our company, which is the larger part of our company. We specialize in acquiring these iconic and legendary assets. That is what our main focus is. So with that comes artists like Bob Marley, like the Prince Estate, Smokey Robinson, Whitney Houston Estate, Ray Charles. I mean, these are all artists that certainly during their lifetime, not just sang about change and racism and ideation, but they actually stood for something and actually stood up and actually made real contributions. So we understand that we have a responsibility to the families of those artists that have passed and obviously the artists that are still living with us right now.
How did Blackout Tuesday come about so quickly? What was the origin of it, and how the music industry acted so quickly?
Yeah, there were two. There was a top marketing executive at Atlantic Records, and another executive. The two of them had worked together. One of them had left Atlantic to start up her own agency. So the two of them, decided that the music industry needed to do something and do something quick. So they came up with the whole idea for Blackout Tuesday and pausing and with the power of Atlantic Records kind of behind it, it quickly picked up steam and, led to something pretty amazing.
So Adam, shifting to your clients that sort of really make their butter with live music and connecting directly with fans. And we know with those kind of large gatherings or more of a 2021 event, what are your clients doing to try to connect with fans, to get their music in front of them, whether it's virtual concerts or other video game inventions or whatever? So what are you seeing with your clients?
Yeah, we very early on, as the virus was really starting, we specifically went to Melissa Etheridge because out of all of our artists, she's the most self-contained. You didn't have to really worry about a band and people in different locations. So we went to Melissa with the idea of, hey, this is something that, you should really embrace. We feel this is going to go on for a long time. Create an at-home concert series. And because she is just such a special person as it is and has so many great things to say and talk about, the kind of one-on-one intimate feel is very easy for her to do. So she embraced it fully. She spent 56 days every single day at 6 o'clock Eastern time, performing for 30 minutes from
every day.
Every day. And what we saw very quickly was, an increase from 4,000 viewers to 5,000 to 6,000, and went on into the low teens on a daily basis. And now, of course, in the beginning, you had to be very sensitive to not wanting to charge people. So we created special merchandise for her, at home quarantine t-shirt with like the date, of the concert on the back of the t-shirt.
Yeah.
Sold $60,000 worth of t-shirts in like 48 hours. And I'm saying all this because Melissa really is a great example of someone who embraced this. And we believe, she was getting calls from Good Morning America and the Rachel Ray Show, and her popularity and her visibility reached a kind of new high through all this. So we expect to see the fruits of all that once the virus is actually, lifted and things can go back to normal.
So do you go to your other clients and say, guys and girls, look what Melissa's doing. You can do this too.
Yes. Again, not as easy for some of them to do, right? Because if you go onto YouTube and check out some of Melissa's stuff, it's her and a guitar, her piano is right there. She's able to loop all sorts of percussion and other instruments through her pedals. So, as opposed to somebody, and we did it, we managed a band called Cypress Hill, some of you may be familiar with. We did do something along those lines, but because Be Real and Sendog are in, one's in Los Angeles and one is in Las Vegas, we had to pre-tape and make sure things worked with click tracks and because of all the subtleties with live performances at one time through the internet. So we did that and it was successful, but it did not ring as true as with Melissa. And so it all depends. We have a band called Plain White Tees. The lead singer can do the same type of thing, perform by himself with an acoustic guitar. But again, you guys have seen a lot of this stuff. It gets stale and tired quickly. It's hard to keep it fresh. It's hard to keep it exciting.
Horace, you're a musician also. You said you also play, not just you're on mute still, but I know you're nodding because you play, right?
I do not. I played saxophone really badly in junior high school.
Oh, so you just
you
study it? You don't play it? I thought you were.
I study it. I sing, but I used to sing, or at least.
Got it.
So I understand, I can read music and I understand music from a performance perspective. I'm just not an instrumentalist.
Got it. Adam, so the Travis Scott Fortnite concert, how does that come about, and who gets paid what in that deal?
Well, a number of people definitely get paid on that deal. That comes about really from, a game as big as Fortnite, as culturally important as Fortnite, realizing how culturally important an artist like Travis Scott is. And, in that specific example, I'm not sure if it went from Travis Scott and his management to the makers of Fortnite or vice versa. But, once music is utilized, as referenced a bit earlier, that opens up, that's the holy grail. Us as publishers couldn't be more excited, because then, there's new income and new revenue streams coming in. Travis Scott as the artist is, I'm sure, getting a very nice fee for participating in that.
But there's no percentage of door and percentage of F&B. It's just, there's no tickets. So it's just a flat fee. EA or whomever owns Fortnite pays a flat fee for the talent for that day.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
So Adam, the other big event this week was the IPO of Warner Music. Can we safely say that streaming music has really just saved the industry, whether it's Warner or Spotify or the others, that there's a real business model here now to streaming? Oh,
without a doubt. And again, from us being a publishing company, it was even more interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up, Peter, because during the kind of, the height of COVID-19, the industry saw a significant increase in streaming with artists and songs that had a sense of comfort for the listener. So the average streaming increase for what we call catalog artists, right? Legacy artists, not what's on the charts today, was about a 3.5% increase. We, having the honor of having the Bob Marley catalog, Bob Marley's catalog increased 24% during that time, which is dramatic compared to the average. It's another reason for why we are so focused on iconic artists and iconic songs, because they stand the test of time, whether it is Bob Marley and Three Little Birds or One Love, or his whole entire catalog, or we recently bought the Burt Bacharach catalog. And some of you may not be familiar with him as an artist, but as a songwriter, arguably one of the top American composers of our time. And I say that only because, again, in this time, Burt wrote the song "What the World Needs Now Is Love." We have been getting, we love being proactive. We love searching out marketing opportunities. With a song like "What the World Needs Now Is Love," our phone is ringing off the hook. Everybody wants that because it is so timely and so relevant, even though it was written 55 years ago. It's.
Yeah. Hey, did I hear that Yankee Stadium? I don't know how familiar you are with. I presume, Adam, on the venue side, Yankee Stadium and some others are doing drive-through concerts or something of that nature.
There was definitely talk of that. I'm not sure where it ended up. There's no question. I know you guys have had different guests on in the past from production and promotion standpoints. There's no question that people are going to experiment, and people are going to try to see what really can excite and stimulate the consumer more than just getting people out of the house. Is it possible to still feel that rush that you get when you go to see Bruce Springsteen live, or when you, well, not me, see, when you go see Rush live or somebody like that. Can you still get that feeling inside your vehicle? It's certainly better than nothing, if as a music fan, for sure. But we'll see.
Yep. And of course, even if you were in person at a traditional venue with a mask on, is certainly a different experience. We'll see if that comes to pass once, if and when live concerts come back, probably in 2021. Adam, thank you, man. It was great to see you and talk to you.
Adam is part of the Bookfar clan, as my brother-in-law, married to my sister, and Danny and Johnny's cousin.
Thank you guys so much. Johnny, good luck with it.
Thanks, Adam.
And thank you so much, Adam. And thank you to Mike Fitz, our guest, for giving you your views on Tulane and re-entry this fall. Horace Anderson, it was so good to see you again, and sharing your views on Pace University Law School and the state of the world and the state of hip hop. Speaking of hip hop, Adam, it was awesome for you to talk about the music business, and really enjoyed having you here. Peter, Johnny, see you next week. Special week next week with the launch of Lenox Hill on Netflix. So tune in next week, 4:30 Friday. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.